There is only one move that works for white in this complicated position, and if you find it, there is a bright future waiting for you at chess. Let me tell you how to calculate in chess like a grandmaster step by step using this extremely instructive position. What's up, chess player? Welcome to the Journey to Grandmaster, the place where you can improve every single aspect of your chess game. I'm continuing my Journey to Grandmaster challenge, and of course, to become a Grandmaster, it's extremely important to calculate like one, because calculation determines like 99% of your success in chess. And there are certain patterns that if you know it, master it, and follow every time, then you're so much closer to the goal of achieving the next level in chess. So here, it's why to move. I really urgently ask you to take your time for analyzing this position, because yes, you can just walk through the video. I'm going to explain you those principles, but if you really invest that time and really deepen your thoughts into this position, then it's going to be so much more instructive and you're going to become such a stronger chess player. I just don't want you to sit there passively and consume the content. Instead, I really want you to work hard to be able to improve your chess here. This video is brought to you by Chessnut. More on that later on. So how do I actually find the best move in every possible chess position? First of all, you look at the position. You think, okay, it's white to move. So the first question I'm asking myself, what is the threat or the threats from the black side here? And you must always start with the most active opportunities, checks, captures, and threats. That's like golden principle. You can never break it, because you're gonna miss so much and you're gonna lose so many games because of that. So you use it both to find the best opportunities for yourself, like it's white to move, whether you have checks, captures, and threats, but also for your opponent, just as important, what kind of opportunities he or she has, whether black has any checks, any captures, or any threats right here. Because if you miss that, if you're not thinking about what your opponent can achieve, then, well, you're risking to just lose because of that. Because chances are he created some checkmating ideas, like it is the case now. So that is always the first question we ask ourselves. And to find out what are those threats, we start with the most active opportunities. So we focus on checks first. What kind of checks there are for black here? Well, there is knight takes f3 here with a check. Within the exchange, of course, we must consider that. There is rook takes g2, another check sacrificing the rook, but not really, because then afterwards this pawn on g2 is no longer there, not protecting the rook on f3, which means that black is going to take that rook immediately back afterwards. So that's absolutely the move we need to consider. Why? Because let's say we play a3 here, our opponent just takes on g2, we take it back, queen takes f3, because remember, the knight is also attacking, the queen cannot be taken, king g1 is the only move, queen goes to f2, king goes to h1, and queen h2 checkmate. So that is a checkmate threat in a few moves here with a move rook to g2. We can never ignore it, a checkmate threat. So once we understand it, we have a few ways to deal with it. First of all, we can just defend against this threat. That is the most obvious way. But that's not the one we start, and so many low-rated players are making this mistake. We are starting, still remember, with the most active opportunities, checks, captures, and threats, because, well, yes, that is a checkmate threat, but if we have a checkmate threat of our own and we can start already with a check, then we might be the first one to deliver a checkmate. And if we start with some passive moves, just defending against our opponent's threats, then we might miss that golden chance and not win the game. So we begin to calculate. Are there any checks here available for white? Well, there are plenty of them with this queen, but it seems like all of them are just losing the queen immediately, like queen takes b7, queen c6, queen a8, or whatever. So there are no reasonable checks available in the position. That's how you go about it. It's not like you're just finding the checks, oh my god, I have a check, I'm just going for it. No. There is another golden principle you must always and always follow. Never make a move without thinking what your opponent can do afterward. The first level of this idea is just to think, whenever you make a move with a certain piece, whether this piece can be captured afterward. If yes, and that's a problem for you, then of course you don't make this move. like for example in case of queen takes b7. Or maybe it can be captured, but you're okay with it because afterwards, let's say you deliver a checkmate, then you're fine. But in every case, you must calculate, you must take into account what your opponent can do. In our case, there is absolutely no reasonable way to deliver a checkmate. So we continue with the second step of the most active opportunities, captures. And here is the moment where it becomes interesting, because we do have one capture. I mean, we cannot take anything with the queen, we cannot take anything with the rook because of checkmate queen takes g2, but we can actually capture this pawn on e3 with the knight, which would attack the queen on d5 and at the same time protect the pawn on g2. So that is the move absolutely that we need to consider. It doesn't mean it's the best move, but it's a move candidate that we calculate right now. So knight takes e3. Now, the queen is under attack, but it's not like checkers. It's not like we are attacking the queen and we are thinking, okay, what should the queen do? No, that's not the way. Checks, captures, and threads. No matter what happens, even if the queen is hanging, we still start with the checks. And of course, we remember that rook takes g2 was such a dangerous threat, so we start immediately with that. Now, if the king takes, we have already seen that variation. Nothing changes after queen f3, queen f2, and queen h2. That is just a checkmate, so it's not going to work that way. If the king just goes away, then of course there is queen takes f3, and well, we are just losing the rook, and we are in huge trouble. So the only move that is left is knight takes g2. Now, we don't stop here, we continue our variation and we start with checks, captures, and threads. That repeats itself, this golden rule, with every move. It doesn't matter what happens, we always start with it, both for us and for our opponent. So knight takes f3 is a check here, which takes the rook at the same time, so we consider that. Now, we would be happy to hide in the corner and play king to h1, but unfortunately, that's not possible. Why? Well, we start with a check. There is only one check for black here, but that is immediately a checkmate. Beautiful one with this 4 knights on the board, knight to f2, checkmate. So the only move available for us is to go to king to f1. Now, there are different ways for black here to go, and unfortunately we need to cover them all if we are playing as white and we want to be sure that this move works, or alternatively, if we just find one line that doesn't work for us, that wins for black here, that's good enough. Then we know that this variation is bad for white and we can just stop calculating it. And it turns out there is one such a line, relatively simple here for black. That starts with a check, of course, always start with a check. So knight goes to d2 check. Now, once again, we need to go somewhere with the king. If the king goes to g1, that doesn't work because after queen d4, there is absolutely nowhere to hide. Once again, after king h1, there is a beautiful checkmate here. After knight to f2, king goes either to h2, then we have knight f3 checkmate. Let me show it on the board. Absolutely no move for the king. And if the king goes back to g1, then there is a simple knight to d3 discover check here. The king goes somewhere like h2, and we can just take on c1, extra rook, and absolutely no compensation for black, to say the least. It's enough for us to understand this variation is bad and we cannot do that as white. So this is how a Grandmaster goes about calculating the variation and finding the best move in the position. First of all, he or she tries to understand what is the threat in the position. In our case, it's rook takes g2 with a checkmate following. Then he or she thinks, okay, what are the ways to stop that? Starting with the most active opportunities, checks, captures, and threads. So he sees a promising opportunity, knight takes e3, that's a capture, then he or she starts to calculate it. And then depending on whether the variation works, if it works and it feels fantastic, he goes for it. If it doesn't work, then we need to proceed with our system further and further until we find a satisfying move. So knight takes e3 doesn't work for us. Besides that, there is one more capture we absolutely need to consider, that is h takes g. We need to consider what black can do in this position. First of all, there is knight takes f3 check, which is grabbing the rook here, and that's also a check, so we must consider it. Well, we must take it, otherwise we just lose the rook without any compensation. And then queen takes f3, just threatening so many checkmates at once. Queen takes g3, queen g2, queen f2, following up by queen h2. That's just a checkmate, so the only way for white to deal with it is to give a lot of checks and hoping it's gonna work. But unfortunately, after queen takes c5, there is a very good move for black, because if you play king b8, trying to hide your king, there is queen to e5 check. Let me show it to you. And then suddenly the tables are turned, white is completely winning. If you go to the corner, queen takes h8 is a checkmate. If you go to the c file, then there is knight d4 or knight d1 discover check, and you're completely busted, you're losing the whole queen. Instead, black should play here king to d7, because it turns out after queen to b5, you can just go to d8, and after queen to a5, the only possible check, there is b6, checks are over, and of course, black is just winning. There is one more trick for white in this position, sacrificing the entire queen with queen to c7 just to provoke the king to go to the c file, but after king takes, and knight to d4, if black would just go away with the king, then white would be happy to take the f3 queen without any compensation, just for free. But unfortunately for white, there is queen to c6. Now white has to take it, but after pawn takes, black is just an extra exchange here, and there is absolutely no compensation for it. Also, the e3 pawn is extremely dangerous passer. Big thank you to the sponsor of this video, the Chestnut company, which is providing this beautiful Chestnut Evo board for me for the purposes of this analysis. It's extremely useful because you can just analyze all of your games, all of the positions, and save it in the PGN formats to take a look later, which you can never do with a simple board. It has so many interesting and useful functions. I have made a complete review about it, and if you want to take advantage of the special offer and get a huge discount and buy one of the Chestnut products, this is just one of them. They have different ones to offer you depending on your preferences, so if you're interested, just use the link in the description to take advantage of this amazing offer and get a huge discount. So those are the two available captures for us, knight takes e3 and h takes g. Both are not working. Now the third step in the formula is to create a threat. The problem is it's just too late to create a threat, because black is already threatening a forcing checkmate in a few moves with check, so there wouldn't be any way to stop that if we create our own threat. So the move like knight to b4, so many players have suggested it in the book, because they gave this exact position for a lot of people, starting from the beginner level and finishing with Michael Adams himself, super grandmaster level, and they recorded the entire thought process of people, how they make the decision, how they find the best move. And a lot of players did suggest the move knight to b4. The problem is it's not taking into account your opponent's threats, which is the mistake number one that causes you so many losses in your chess career. So after rook takes g2, there's just checkmate, as we covered, so we can never do that. Knight to d4 is another very intriguing opportunity to create this threat. Remember, we want to open up the file for the rook and threaten like rook takes c5. That would be very, very good for us. But unfortunately, once again, it's black who is starting to deliver those threats. And remember that not only this g2 pawn was hanging, but also the rook on f3. And now after knight takes f3, white is in big trouble, because after pawn takes, then queen takes d4, and black is simply winning material. And after knight takes f3, which feels like, well, we are taking the knight back, the knight is secured on f3, but there is rook to d1 check, and unfortunately, because of the back rank problem, together with this incredibly powerful passer, black is just winning. Because remember, from the material point of view, black has an extra exchange here. So after queen takes d1, you have to play either knight to f1 or queen to f1. In both cases, there is e2 coming, and well, white is absolutely winning here. After knight takes e2, we can just exchange the queens as black takes, knight to e3 check, king goes away, and then just knight takes f5, and that's an extra exchange without any compensation for black. So knight to d4 also doesn't work, and the reason behind that, we have multiple threats here, rook to g2 and knight to f3. When that is the case, we should ideally look for an opportunity to deal with both threats with one move simultaneously. That is a so-called multi-purpose move. That's a type of move that I always encourage you to look for. So you are making one move, but it has different ideas in mind. And this is how we deal with this position and how we find the best move. So how to deal with knight takes f3 and rook takes g2 simultaneously? What kind of a move can defend both squares at the same time? Before I reveal the right move to you, I want to offer you something extremely special, the best way to improve your chess and build a complete holistic opening repertoire lifetime in just 10 days. Imagine how cool it would be to play chess without ever having opening troubles again. What if I told you I could teach you all openings you will ever need in just 10 days? You get lifetime access to more than 110 pure value video tutorials, almost 100 practical tasks to apply your knowledge immediately into practice, 30 plus bonus videos to dive 10 times deeper, as well as private community where all questions you might ever have are answered daily. Get a $200 limited time discount with the link in the description and forget about all opening pain once and for all. I hope you have found it already. That is knight to e1. Not only that, not only we defend both things, but we are still creating our threats, namely rook takes c5. If we are allowed to do that, we are just simply winning the game immediately. So that is how powerful knight to e1 is. Now, the key difference is, of course, comparing to the move knight takes e3, that we also defend here the rook on f3. So after rook takes g2, we can just take it back with the king, and everything is completely protected. Knight takes f3 doesn't work. We have rook c5, queen takes f3 is not possible because the rook is under protection. The second threat we have talked about is knight takes f3, and of course that is the move black should go for because that is an extra exchange with a check. Now we cannot take with the knight. Remember, we have already covered that variation. After rook d1, black is just winning, so we have to take it with the pawn. Now there is no immediate checkmate for black. There is even no check at all, and no real capture either, and there is a huge threat rook takes c5, so black absolutely needs to deal with it. Now there are multiple ways. There is king to b8, but then still the c5 pawn is under attack, so the best way for black to play is to play b6, because now basically this is not a threat anymore and all of the black threats are still there. There is though the knight hanging on g4, and we can take it multiple ways with f-pawn or with h-pawn. The engine says both captures are perfectly playable here for white, f takes and h takes, but I would argue nobody in their right mind would take on g4 with the f-pawn as a human being, leaving that diagonal so vulnerable for black. So the right move is h takes g, at least from a human perspective, and now it seems like, well, we have protected everything, and then we have a slight material advantage because we have two knights there for rook. But unfortunately, black still has enough resources to create dangerous threats to compensate the material imbalance and to reach equality here. Black has to be active, and that's something you also need to understand. So you cannot just in such a position say, okay, the position is a little bit better for white, I'm gonna just, I don't know, shuffle the pieces here and there. No, if you have some material disadvantage, you absolutely need to be active, because otherwise your opponent is gonna stabilize the situation and you are busted. So a strong chess player, especially Grandmaster, understands the importance of that when he calculates the variation. And if you are calculating from the white side, you also need to understand that and try to find the best opportunities for your opponent. That is what differentiates the average player and the Grandmaster. Grandmaster always makes it top priority to find the best moves for the opponent, because chances are the opponent is going to find it, and if you didn't, then you're going to be busted. So there is a way, no checks, no captures here for black, but there is a way to create a threat, namely queen to d6. And the problem is that knight is hanging. There is no way to defend it, and if it goes forward, knight d4 would be a perfect move, threatening just to win one of the pieces with the fork. There is queen to h2 check, and that's just a checkmate. So the only move is knight to f1, because not only we are going away and save that knight, we also control the h2 square. Now the rook is hanging. The most active move for black to go is rook to d1. That threatens to take the rook. If the rook goes away, the knight on e1 is hanging, so white basically has to take. Now queen takes back, once again threatening to take that knight. So the knight has to go away. There is absolutely no way to protect it. Knight to d3. Now the knight is protected by the queen. Black has to continue in the same manner. Checks, captures, and threats. The most active opportunities, no checks, no captures, but there is a way to create a threat, e2. There's a multi-threat move. The f1 knight is hanging twice with the queen and with the pawn, just promoting a new queen. Otherwise, there is e1 threat, there is queen takes d3, and then e1 queen, so there are different threats here. And normally, if there are multiple threats created for you, the only way you can deal with it is by creating a check, because as long as you create checks, there is no way for black to make all of those threats real. So there is only one reasonable check here, queen to c6. Well, if you go to a6, your queen is like offside. Black's king is trying to escape, king to b8. We continue with the check, queen to d8. king goes to b7, because otherwise if you go back, you are never going to escape the checks. We continue with our checks, nothing has changed, white has absolutely no choice. Now the king goes back, we also go back. The only other way to continue for black is king to a6, and now it's time for us to find the only move available, because queen a4, the desirable check, of course, is not possible. Black will just take it, that square is covered. But there is, fortunately for us, another check. Knight takes c5, sacrificing the knight, but once black takes it, there is a perpetual check with queen to c6. King goes a5 and queen takes c5. The king has absolutely nowhere to hide after king a4. We even win the position with b3 checkmate. If king goes away to a6, then we repeat the position. That's a draw. So here you have it, the golden principles to help you calculate in chess like a grandmaster. The question is, how do you put it all together to play a fantastic game of chess? In this video, I show you the most beautiful game Magnus Carlsen has ever played and how he uses this golden principle to make it possible.